My name is John R. Glaska, and I've completed the requirements for my PsyD degree, my Doctorate of Clinical Psychology. I live in Ojai, California. That's in Ventura County, a little bit south of Santa Barbara, and I'm very, very happy to be here. I originally was going to do my project on the evidence base of neurofeedback, which is working with the electrical potentials that are measured at the scalp in a therapeutic manner. There is a growing body of research that gives evidence to the effectiveness of neurofeedback for some conditions. It is not universally recognized. The research that exists has some methodological problems. There are some ways around that. Neurofeedback is difficult to work with in research because you can't encapsulate it and prescribe it to somebody. Neurofeedback requires a skilled practitioner to deliver it, requires quite a commitment on the part of the client to come back for repeated sessions, sometimes 20, 40, or 60 sessions, 45 minutes each. It isn't something that you can write a prescription for, and it's hard to find thousands of people who are willing to commit themselves to that process, to have control groups and placebo groups and blind clinicians. So I was originally going to do the evidentiary base of neurofeedback, but Dr. Allen suggested to me that I try to incorporate something on what's coming out of UCLA with Dan Siegel and mindfulness, Alan Shore, and Louis Cosolino, Bonnie Bodnock. When he first proposed the idea to it, I considered suicide because I had no idea how I was going to do this. And in looking at it, I realized that what Dan Siegel is talking about is the ability of the subjective part of our reality to change the objective parts of the brain. You can change the objective physiology of the brain through metacognition. And what they're discovering now is that there's neuroplasticity throughout the lifespan. You have neurogenesis, synaptogenesis, and neural integration going on throughout the lifespan. In a lot of ways, the proof of that is also what has enabled neurofeedback to be developed to the point it is now. And that's what's happened with electronics and computers. The evolution of neuroimaging has enabled us to examine physiological changes in the brain as a result of talk therapy, okay? Now, we always knew, as people who are interested in mental health, that empathy was the key ingredient in therapy. In trying to demonstrate whether CBT was superior to Rogerian counseling or whatever modality you chose, the only thing that they could correlate with a prediction of success was the perceived level of empathy on the part of the client. How did he perceive the empathy coming from the therapist? Okay, now that has been scientifically demonstrated. Okay, so what has happened is the psychological concept of the empathy has physiological correlates. Okay, the physiological changes in the brain, neuroplasticity, has been documented by neuroimaging. The same electronics has enabled neurofeedback to become highly sophisticated in measuring the electrical potentials that you can measure at the scalp, and in providing feedback to the client when those brain waves are on a targeted frequency. So you could say that electronics, the evolution of electronics, has co-fostered the interpersonal neurobiology and the discovery of lifelong neuroplasticity and the methods of neurofeedback, both things. So when Dr. Allen proposed that, it wasn't formed in my head at all. But after reading Dan Siegel and having taken the interpersonal neurobiology course at CSU, it all started to come together, that you can take a physiological modality, something that operates in the body, like psychopharmacology, and get a psychological change, Okay, and psychopharmacology acts at the synapse. Okay, it changes the interstitial soup and changes what goes on at the synapse. Neurofeedback changes what happens at the synapse through operant conditioning, allowing the brain to change itself to modify its pattern of electrical potentials that are seen, therefore changing what happens at the synapse as well. So both psychopharmacology and neurofeedback target the electrical potentials that are either inhibited at the synapse or passed on, okay? And if there is a site in the body that could be called the locus of the mind-body connection, the synapse is a really good candidate, okay? And that generates all kinds of debate. But what happens at the synapse, the firing of neural ensembles, millions, thousands, and millions of neurons, produces what we call cognition, emotion, and behavior. And exactly how it does that, we don't know. But both of those things, psychopharmacology, which has an evidence base, and neurofeedback, which has a growing evidence base, target what happens at the synapse, okay? Which I consider the locus of the mind-body connection, or you could call it the juncture of physiology and psychology, which is the title of my thesis. So when Dr. Allen had suggested to me incorporating the ideas of Dan Siegel, in reading Dan Siegel, I'm seeing that what happens at the synapse is being changed through the empathetic therapeutic alliance, okay? So now we've got three paths that I could consider in doing my thesis. Metacognition, therapeutic alliance, okay? A psychological approach that actually has physiological changes at the synapse. Psychopharmacology changes at the synapse, and neurofeedback changes at the synapse. Psychopharmacology has all kinds of side effects, okay? A lot of them not beneficial. It's invasive, okay? Neurofeedback allows the brain to change itself through feedback that comes in through the senses, okay? They are endogenous changes made by the brain itself. And in a lot of ways, the evolution of the brain is mimicked by neurofeedback, because the brain has changed through experience with the environment and through experience with the feedback and neurofeedback. The brain is capable of modifying the electroencephalographic patterns that you can measure at the scalp, okay? And I had mentioned that neurofeedback has difficulty with research because it is so complicated. And it is criticized by advocates, particularly Doctors Liu and Barkley, who wrote a criticism of neurofeedback in regard to the treatment of ADHD. And all of the criticisms that they leveled at the neurofeedback research are valid scientific criticisms. But now we're going to do, science is going to do an end run around those criticisms, because now with neuroimaging, we can measure changes in neural substrates. We can see changes in neural substrates post-talk therapy, post-psychopharmacology, and post-neurofeedback. We are starting to see research that demonstrates congruency of effects in neural substrates for accepted evidence-based therapies and neurofeedback. Congruent neural substrate effects from both demonstrate that neurofeedback is another pathway to achieve the same end. And we aren't going to have to worry about the criticism from Doctors Liu and Barkley, because neuroimaging is going to allow us to demonstrate the physiological neural substrate effects that are congruent with evidence-based therapies.